Hello everyone and welcome to the Dyslexia Life Hacks Show. I'm your host Matthew Head and this episode is going out on the 5th of June 2024, which is also the same day as my 40th birthday. So from a break from my regular interview format, I thought I'd sit here and reflect back on 40 years of living as a dyslexic person. So hold on to your hats. I'm not quite sure where this is going to go, but let's see how we get on. As mad as it seems, this is also episode 80 of the Dyslexia Life Hacks Show, which, because when I started, it kind of started as a standalone episode with me and one of my friends talking about my experience with dyslexia. We sort of linked into dyslexia in the workplace and put it out on YouTube. And really, it was one of my other friends that said that didn't know so much about my sort of growing up with dyslexia until they'd heard this sort of 45-minute long episode. So that was sort of the end of 2020. I was redundant at the time. And that's when the website Dyslexia Life Hacks got started, which I'm sure if you've read the website or listened to other episodes of the podcast, or even if you've been here since the early days, you would have known that that really was a list of bullet points on my phone. And I sort of taught myself how to code the website and I say code, I use a website builder. Taught myself how to use a website builder on WordPress and made a website while recovering from a broken wrist, which I managed to gain by falling off a motorcycle going around a go-kart track. So we sort of rolled round and it got me thinking about the podcast. Like, I really enjoy listening to podcasts and I've been listening to the Tim Ferriss show since, been on my grad scheme, so 2016, listening and commuting in the car, and really love the kind of sync, the deep dive in, and particularly behind people, and how Tim in particular does a really good job of getting to know the person behind all these things. Like, he's talked to some seriously clever people or experts in their field or very, very big names. And he always makes them sound really normal. And I always thought, well, this is what sort of inspires me a little bit. You listen to interviews by these big names and these experts in their fields, and how behind it all, they are just people. Like, we know this kind of intellectually, I suppose, but do we actually know it when we're listening to them or watching a movie they're in or watching somebody do a spotless speech or holding a TED talk? If you listen to something like a podcast, I find makes them really accessible. So that's kind of one of the driving forces behind it. So I'd realised in this standalone episode that come around to July 2021 and yeah, I'd already got episode 1, and I think I'd recorded up to episode 3 or 4, and then launched it, repackaged it, the first one with an intro and the hopefully now well-known guitars at the beginning and the end, which is my school friend Matt. He's a grade 7 guitarist, so I asked him to write a intro and outro theme for me. I'm not a grade 7 guitarist, and you would have got something far heavier if you'd allowed me to do it, and not as good. When I listened to it coming through my phone, I was like, yes, he's nailed that with my little instructions of what to do. And yeah, so we repackaged that sort of standalone episode as the first episode of this podcast, and I promised myself I'd do 6 episodes and see where it went. And here we are at episode 80. So it went okay, I suppose. Not only did it go okay, it's been a crazy journey, really. We'll get deeper into this through the episode, but I'd never spoken about dyslexia until well into my 30s. Like, I mean, well into my 30s. For people who don't know my kind of background, I left school at 16, went to college till I was 18 studying automotive engineering, then finished with education and went and worked as a lorry mechanic till my mid-20s before I went to university in Aberdeen and got an engineering degree at 31. But I still didn't talk about dyslexia. Yes, I ticked the boxes on the forms and got the stuff and went off the extra exams and all this kind of stuff, but I wouldn't talk about it, not the way that we are now with this microphone in front of me. And, you know, it's been great and it's been surprising, and it doesn't cease to amaze me when I look at sort of the download figures and the interaction it gets on social media. And this is very much something I do when I get home from work. I'm still sat here at the minute in my work shirt. Yeah, that's what sometimes it ends up being. I've edited up to sort of 10 o'clock at night and then gone straight to bed and great to work in the morning. I've edited at 6 o'clock in the morning because sometimes you have to fit it around everything else. And but the podcast seems to be doing well, and it always humbly surprises me when I go to something like the Dyslexia show and people know about it and about me, and that's considering the rather wonderful company that's there, and there are great people doing great things. It's always nice to hear. But I guess I kind of got the principles of it down really early on. Every guest gets the rapid fire questions. Every guest gets interviewed in a relaxed format. We always try and give an hour's worth of interviewing time, and little things like that to try and get the kind of the relaxed conversation and the openness out of people that I'm hoping comes across in the final recording. But when I started it, got some good downloads in the first sort of 6 episodes, and that allowed me to keep going. And I think it's important when you start sort of something like this, that it takes a fair bit of time when you try to fit it around other things, that you do commit to a number. I can't remember now, but 6 went to I'm going to do 15 or 20. Then it was going to do 25 and then 50. And then I'm fully in the flow, and it kind of starts to work. And I've updated the website a couple of times, tweaked the logo, and it's been great. And I've talked to some really fascinating people and stuff where your email pings or some social media channel pings, and it's like, I do this, and I'd be interested in getting a guest in your podcast. I'm like, wow. I didn't even know dyslexia people did that. But that's the whole point of it, that let's show that dyslexic people are just that. They're just people who have a neurodiversity that makes their brain slightly different to other people's. And that should be celebrated. And it should be, and I'd like the fact that hopefully everybody hears what it's like, I guess, behind the scenes, like drop into an episode and you can go from MPs to strategy directors to librarians to barristers, and then all the people that are linked in with the assistive technology or the coaching, or the companies that provide equipment, the companies that do workplace coaching, how does access to work come in board, and all of that kind of stuff. So it's been really kind of exciting, and stood on the stages at a place like Dyslexia Show talking about dyslexic story no longer makes me sweat. And I'd have hated it. I'd have hated it at 35. I got used to it at 37, but now it's kind of, it's nice. And it's nice that people sit there and engaged and smile and nod. And it's nice that people are listening to this podcast, and I hope people continue to listen, and we'll find more and more interesting guests to talk to. So we'll park the kind of beginning of the podcast for there, but what I thought would be really interesting, we'll see how this goes, and where was I when I was 18, and what would the 18-year-old believe that the 40-year-old me would have been doing? So a bit of scene setting, 18, so I'd been in college at that point. You have to bear with me because I remember my life through which motorcycle I had at the time. So what I'd been, 18, I'd have passed my driving test by that point, but I'd have had a Honda CB400 Super 4, and I would have had that since I was 17 because I passed my motorcycle test the moment I was allowed to. And if anybody's old enough to remember, back then, if you passed your motorcycle test when you were under 21, you had to have 33 brake horsepower restrictions in your motorbike for the first 2 years. So I was waiting until I could turn 19 to take the restrictor kit out of the bike. Roll forwards till when I was 19 and took that restrictor kit out, and the extra power showed how bad the suspension was on that motorcycle, because it was a fairly old one, a K-Reg at that point, and that was 10 years old, over 10 years old. Anyway, enough about reminiscing about motorbikes. Yeah, but I would have just 18, I would have got driving lessons for my 18th birthday, so I'd have been learning to drive. I think that was my mum's subtle way of making sure I didn't ride motorbikes as often, particularly through the winter. And I would do silly stuff like go out when it was snowing because I want to get to my mates, which It's not very sensible. Don't do that. And I'd have been in college. I'd have been studying automotive engineering at college. I did a first diploma straight out of school. So I'd have been in what they call a BTEC National Diploma at that point. And I'd have also had sort of some weird kind of mid-length hair, because being a school kid in the 90s, everybody had curtains. And I got to the point after school and college that I didn't know what to do with my hair at that point. So I just kept growing it. So at some point, it eventually ended up down to my shoulders. But I think I might have been 19, 20 before that happened. So one thing the 18-year-old me wouldn't have believed is the 40-year-old me is struggling to keep his hair in. So that's the scene setting there. And that was it. Kind of doing on a 2-year college course, got another year to go, learning about cars and engineering and how cars are engineered. Now, I knew at that point, because I remember we were 18, 19, feeling frustrated when you have the careers advisor come around and all they can possibly tell you is about going to university. And I did not want to go to university back then. I so did not want to go with a passion. To be honest, I was done. I've said this in talks before. I was completely and utterly burnt out from doing the education thing. I'd poured everything in that college course. The college course had a little bit of a sales thing of being a motorsport engineering course. So you get to write reports on your favourite motor racing championships. So I wrote about the World Superbike Championship and how Carl Fogarty is great and how a Honda RC45 is awesome, and all this kind of stuff. I'll put links to these motorbikes in the show notes just in case anybody wants to know what they look like. But I knew that. I knew I didn't want to go to uni. I'd poured everything into all these projects. I kind of fried my brain and pushed so hard that I was getting really good grades, actually, looking back, to be honest, that I had all the grades and all the info that I can make at university. I just had none of the belief. I had 0 or -0 probably, and I was strung out. I think I'd have the mental relentless energy that I poured into college. I'm not sure I could have sustained through first couple of years at uni. I think I'd have just completely fried my mind, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I didn't understand that going to uni and studying engineering, which we were being pushed towards, automotive engineering / motorsport engineering, what it meant. The employers I know are aware of that are here now, I didn't know at the time, but what do you do? So where would that 18-year-old think he'd have been at 40? Well, as I'm sure some of the people who might be listening are either maybe getting towards 40 already are, it's weirdly the first kind of birthday you remember your parents having, which is weird. I remember my mum's 40th birthday mug being in the cupboard, So I think I didn't really know my young mind too much, and I didn't really know my mind too well until I got well into my 30s. So, take that for the lesson. If any of you are 20-something, give it time. I think thought he was so far ahead. And to be honest, it was so far away. And it's God, that's kind of... Initially, I had thought that's, you're getting kind of old then. And that's... you're getting... And also, I expected to have... I don't know why. In this silly head of mine, it would be expecting to have lots of money. And, you always fantasize about, as you do with a young person, driving sports cars. And I still really want to buy a Honda Fireblade. I've got no use for a Honda Fireblade now. That's why I haven't bought one. But, Honda Fireblades are cool. They always will be. But I always, I was going to go to college, finish college, get a job. And I was going to keep that job indefinitely. I was going to work as whatever the career I'd picked, which happened to be a mechanic, and I was going to do that all the way through. Which is funny looking back at it and reflecting on it. That's not the career my dad had. So my primary male role model had multiple different kind of jobs. My dad's worked as a mechanic for the police force before. He used to go timber cutting, and then by the time I was around, he was driving his own lorries for his own business. And he never had the same job all the way through his life. So I don't know why I thought that was what it was going to be, but it was college, finished, job. And that'd have been it. I'd have been, buy a small house, because I think I hadn't quite realised how, even in the early 2000s, buying houses were getting harder to reach. I think even by that point, early 2000s, I don't think I'd appreciated the discrepancy between the house prices and income at that point. But that was really, as much as my 18-year-old brain was ability to look forward to 40. I mean, one of the things I've always done, and I do long-term plan, and I do long-term plan quite well now, and it's something I have to do at work, and it's something I do in my personal life and things, but I will very much think of things as each step. Let's do this step. We hit this step. We move to the next step. We move to the next step. And I was even like that at 18. So as much as my primary long-term plan probably was, what car can I upgrade? The car I got for free as my first car that I had to fix the air gasket on and all that stuff. And, how do I move out of home, and how do I buy another bike? And I'm sure buying it did. I'm not sure. I know, because I did it. Buying another bike to Presidents. Because that's what happened. But yeah, I had very much, my self-belief at that time had got me to the point where I would have got that mechanic job, and that's where I'd have stayed, because that's what I thought I could do, and that's all I thought I could do. And there is nothing wrong with having a career as a car mechanic, or a lorry mechanic in my case. But if it's not actually what you want to do, then maybe we have to put other steps in. So that kind of moves me neatly on to, where am I actually at 40? Well, I did buy lots of new bikes, obviously. So currently it's a Triumph Tiger 900. And the Venture bikes weren't cool when I was 18, so I never thought I'd be riding one of them at 40. They're just now in vogue. But I don't work as a mechanic job. I didn't get promoted through the mechanic system. I didn't go to mechanics, to workshop foremen, to shift leaders and all that kind of stuff, and through the dealership model. I work as a lead engineer for a major car company, working on prototype car designs and all the prototype stuff that goes on with supporting a major styling studio that the car company I work for have. Past the engineering team to do that. Now, that's rather different to leaving college and going into the world of work. So what happened? Well, already touched on it. By my mid-20s, I was working in a Volvo truck garage, and we worked 4-on-4 shifts, 4 12-hour days but 4 days off. Now, the workshop is designed, I think it's 15 or 20 sort of technicians it can have in, with lots of lorries in. But on Saturdays and Sundays, it's a shift of 4, a skeleton shift really, to do a bit of work and keep the vehicles for the major fleet that we were looking after running. And hence the 24/7 coverage. And you get a lot of time to think. You sat there on a Sunday and, people, the other 3 guys are lost in this workshop, or they go, and you get a lot of time to click it over. And you just go round and round, and I think I've been working as a mechanic since 20, maybe 19, all the way through to now at 25. It's just I don't want to do this. I could look into the future. I knew people I work with who are 10, 20, 30 years older than me, and they're doing the same thing. And it's not what I want. And I think it's great when people do what they want and they do it for that long and that's what they love. But for me, it wasn't what I wanted to do. And I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? First thing, sometimes a change is as good as a rest, as the saying goes. So I applied for another job. moved from Volvo trucks to Mercedes-Benz and hated it. I hadn't realised that I just cannot work late shifts. So I got a job that was days one week and lates the other. And I just can't do it. I can't work till midnight. After about 10:30, 4 or 5 nights a week, I just can't remember anything. You know, come in the next day, somebody's like, what did you do at this point? Oh God, I don't know. And it's cold and it's dark and miserable in the winter. So that was that really convinced me that I really, really didn't want to do that. And I have this kind of weird bit of resolve that I don't just try not to just go back to what is safe, which would have been the job at Volvo. So I had started having a look at what can I do to use some of the skills I've got and some of the interests I have, but apply them in a different way. Like, I love how things work. Love cars. Obviously love motorbikes, as you can probably tell. I may have mentioned it a couple of times. It's like, God, he's mentioning bikes again. Like, come on, talk about something else. And I'll sit there on YouTube and watch out like how aviation. I'm just fascinated by how stuff works. So I remember getting picked up at school because you had to, at one point, write a list of books in your bookshelf, and 3 of them in the Haynes manuals from my granddad's old car that he would just give to me when he sold his car and bought another one. And I used to like flip the Haynes manual with all the open pictures where they got bits of the engine apart, just to how it goes together. Sort of suits my dyslexic mind in terms of how machines work and how it all goes together. So I was having a look around, and I remember seeing an advert for a job, and I want to say it was BP or Shell, but a major oil company, and they were doing engine testing not very far away from where I grew up. And I looked at the list, and it's like mechanical knowledge, understanding of engines, and like you get to take the engines apart. And basically, what they do is they run the engines until they explode, and they take the engines apart and work out what the failure mode is. That's a way of like destructive testing to improve the quality of their engine oil. It's like, well, I certainly can blow engines up. I've tried this. I could do all these things, but I need an engineering degree. And also, sorry, we're back to bikes again. Trying for motorcycles. I have people in the UK design bikes. And wow, I can do that. I had a Triumph at the time. Still do have a Triumph, just a different one. I could do that, I think. How do I do it? Engineering degree. And I don't mean this in a big-headed way. It's more of I'd love to do that. And I was reading the spec. Like, I understand how bikes work. I could talk about bikes for ages. A little bit naivety, like what an engineer does as well. But every time you read an engineering degree and you kind of read a few things in the advert, so I don't understand what that is. And then I kind of Google it or whatever it was at the time. That was linked to something you'd learn on an engineering degree. So that was it. It's like, well, I need one of these engineering degree things. But how do I do that? We went along and worked out what a few universities and applied and got offers, and very long, short story short, starting university. But I don't want to kind of talk about going to university, maybe because I've talked about it in sort of other podcasts before, and maybe we can do an episode where maybe I get somebody else, a guest interviewer on, and we can talk that through. And I think that might work better in that format. So I'm going to skip through to, kind of what are the challenges and strengths and stuff. How do I get from being the 18-year-old that has kind of planned to work in a garage all their life to a 40-year-old that doesn't work in a garage and now designs the vehicles that at one point in his career he might have potentially been able to repair if he carried on the career path he was on at 18 through to 25. To be honest, the biggest challenge is the dyslexia. Like, two things. I thought clever people went to universities, and I thought clever people had professional jobs. It wouldn't have mattered to me how many professions I met. I'd have still been in awe of them, And back then, I was always in awe of people that I met who could use words better than I could or English better than I could, because to me, somehow they were smarter than I was. And some of them definitely were. But being able to be good with words and writing everything beautifully is not the only measure of this. And that was always what it was. I remember going to uni and thinking, they're going to catch me out. Like, they're going to work out that I can't do this. And they're going to work out I'm not smart enough to be here. Which is daft, because I passed all the tests, hit the grade to get in there, and then it's that kind of voice on your shoulder thing, isn't it? They let you in because you're older. They like mature students. They let mature students in anyway, which is wrong, because any university has standards. Why would they just let people in because they're older? If they don't make the grade, they don't make the grade. But telling me at the time, I couldn't, and of course, did a subject that suited me as well. I didn't really shake the shackles of that off until, I think, cramming exams for the first semester, thinking I was going to fail, and didn't. Then passed the first year with a good grade. Passed the second year with a good grade. Being invited onto the fast track master's program because my grades were there. Started to lose the shackles of it. But it's still something, even when I got into the workplace, that I kind of struggled with, really, until I set the website up and started talking to more people about dyslexia. And finding out about programs and how other people do things. And again, listen to other people's podcasts or whatever. And really, it wasn't until I set the website up and got talking to more people and just got more comfortable with it. It's like, no, I bring this to the table. And that's a good thing. Like, some of my lesser strengths are here, but the lesser strengths are now, or weaknesses, as I should put it, are not as weak as they used to be. I've done the work and the miles on them, made sure they're not as weak as they used to be, but I'm not a natural big word kind of person in terms of writing. It's one of the reasons you don't get long blog posts from me via this platform. It's just not the medium I enjoy. But where did I get the strength from, really? Like, and I struggle to think of this, and it's something, a bit of a quirk of my memory. I don't really look back and remember how I felt or what I felt at the time, which I know sounds ridiculous considering how I can remember exactly what motorbike I had and give you all the specs for it. But, I'm sure somebody listening's like, that's because of X. Feel free to send me a message if you, because I would love to dig into that one. I just remember being absolutely relentless. Like, yes, there was a voice in my head that was like, they're going to work you out, you're not smart enough. But I'd gone all in. I'd given up my full-time job. I'd moved cities. Okay, I had the benefit of moving in with my girlfriend at the time. But other than that, it was just sheer relentlessness. I was all in. And if it failed, I think part of me in the early year didn't want to go home back to my mum and dad's and say that I couldn't do it. Don't get me wrong, my parents are supportive, but I don't think it's not, I don't know why I'm laughing, it's not funny. I don't think I wanted to look at mum and dad in the eye and tell them I'd failed. I don't think they'd have been disappointed. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I kind of slightly fabricated them being disappointed to keep me going, but I didn't want to go home and tell them that I hadn't done it. And I didn't want to be that guy who went to university, gave everything up to then drop out of it in the first few years. So it just kind of gave me this relentless drive. And I'm not even sure if it was fear. It never felt like fear. It was just driven. I just kept pushing. I got involved in some extra projects that did really well. It was just a driving force. I was absolute driving force. I just wanted it to happen. I got all the help. I ticked the right box in the form, got the scribes and exams. I got the laptop. I got Dragon. I got text help. I got all the bits I needed to get. And it just kept on pushing. Yes, there were dark points. And I remember dark points of writing a paper for one of the subjects. And I'm 500 words short of the word count. It's like, I have nothing left. I don't have anything left. And you try and find another example and you put a bit more in. It's like, I have nothing. And there was something with one of the exams and things like that. And it was the same at work. I got the university degree and I carried on that momentum, that relentless energy as now a 30-something into work. And it was a tricky time in my grad scheme, and I just kept pushing through it. Like, I'd worked so hard at that point to get an engineering degree and then get a graduate scheme at a major company that even in the dark days when some of the stuff wasn't going the way I wanted, I just had grit. I think relentlessness might be the wrong word, but grit. If you've ever read Andrew Duckworth's book on grit, I think that's probably where I was at that point. Just kept going. And it's an interesting thing, really. I've always kind of been a bit gritty and dug in. And if anybody hasn't read Andrew Duckworth's book, the opening chapter is about teaching dyslexics, and she realises how hard they work to get things. And that's what dyslexic people are. One of the inspirations of her researching grit and then eventually writing this book, and obviously all of the papers and stuff that she's released about it. And I think there is a bit in that. Like, the negative side of being dyslexic in the school system when I went through it, and yes, I got statements at 6. Obviously, it gave me a lot more help than I would have had. And I imagine that school would have been rougher if I hadn't had that. But it still takes its toll. And that probably was one of the reasons that by 18, I was done. Like, I finished college, picked my stuff out, thought I'd never have to see a textbook again. None of I was happy with that. But when I eventually got round to the idea of and warmed to it in my mid-20s and knew it was just something I needed to do to get to where I wanted to be in life, then the grit comes through. And, does beg the question, doesn't it? Now, how do you instill the grit without the negative self-belief that I think quite a lot of dyslexics do struggle with through education, and not just dyslexics, other neurodiverse people? How do you do it? How do you get that without the other side of it? So I think with that, we're going to leave it there. So I want to thank you for listening in to, I guess, my thoughts and reflections on what it's like to nearly be 40 and looking back at what the 18-year-old me would have thought about the 40-year-old me and just how different life has been. And I hope people have enjoyed this episode, and it'd be really interesting to see what people think of some of the thoughts within it. And I will be back in the next episode, back to our regular interview-style format. So that leaves me to say thank you very much for taking the time to listen, and I'll speak to you in the next episode. Goodbye for now.